Welcome back on Chapter 7 of Catalyst by Lisa Beeson, Book 3 in the Transcendent series. And here we go. Goodness. As the door of the greenhouse closed behind her, Ari's stomach let out a loud growl of discontent. Thankfully, it had waited until she was alone, so she didn't embarrass herself. But she couldn't ignore the angry emptiness any longer. She quickly made her way back to her room to change and sprayed some dry shampoo in her hair to get rid of the smell, before going down to the kitchen to scavenge for something to eat. Nina and Corey had already left to cook for the Nexus Organic Cafe and Healing Center, otherwise known as the Knock, and the pizzas were long gone, so she devoured the pot of ham and potato soup they had left simmering on the stove instead, as well as some of the leftovers from the previous night's dinner. She then made her way to the rooms on the second floor dedicated to the Pinnacle School that Hugo and Maren ran year-round. She breezed into the joint classroom as innocuously as she could, trying not to distract anyone from their lessons, and made a beeline for Hugo's office. Soren looked up from his work and smiled with relief when he saw her. She smiled back and gave his shoulder a squeeze as she passed by. Cam glanced up from his tablet and looked at her questioningly. Then, using the sign language she taught him back at Armir, he signed to her, "Where have you been?" Ari made the mental connection and thought to him, "I'll tell you all about it later. I've had a very bizarre morning." "Okay," he thought back to her, his brows raised with curiosity. She broke the connection as Skylar jumped in front of her. Ahem. She broke the connection as Skylar jumped in front of her and asked, "What was old Enzo like? Did you see his scary white eyes?" "I'll tell you about it later," Ari promised. She knocked on Hugo's office door before rushing in, determined not to get distracted from her goal again. "Hugo, she started, but stopped when she realized she had interrupted a conversation he was having with Alvaro. Hugo looked up at her, and Alvaro quickly shut what looked like a sketchbook and made as if he was about to bolt. She could feel the blood rushing to her face in embarrassment. She tried to apologize. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt anything." "Good job. Way to make things even worse." I was done anyway," Alvaro mumbled as he made a dash for the door and slipped past her. She called after him, "Alvaro, wait!" But he continued out the door like he hadn't heard her. Crap. She quickly took the folded papers out of her pocket and tossed them onto Hugo's desk. "I had a really clear memory this morning. Please read that over and I'll be right back," she said in a quick burst before going after Alvaro. She connected to Cam as she left and thought to him, "When you can, go tell Hugo I gave you permission to read the memory I just gave him. I'll be right back." Then she broke the connection before he had a chance to respond. Alvaro must have run out of there pretty quick because he already had a decent head start. She followed the path of his energy signature back towards his room. She heard the sound of his door closing just as she was coming off the elevator on the 3rd level. She crouched up to his door and knocked. "Alvaro, can we please talk?" She looked through the door and saw him sitting at his desk, purposely ignoring her, probably hoping she'd give up and go away. "You're not going to get rid of me that easily, bud." "Alvaro, please," she practically begged. "I want to apologize." He looked up in confusion, then came towards the door. She backed away a bit so she wouldn't crowd him. Even though they were the same age, she towered over him by a good 6 inches, which made her feel like a huge hulking ogre. He opened the door a bit and peered up at her. "What do you want to apologize for?" "Can I come in?" she asked. He let out a resigned sigh and then opened the door all the way and walked back to his desk chair. Ari left the door open, since that was the rule. According to the code of conduct, they could have visitors of the opposite sex in their rooms as long as it's before 9:30 p.m., and the door remained open. Ari made her way past the door that led to the common room between Alvaro's and George's rooms, and sat down on the edge of the small couch near his desk. Alvaro refused to look at her as he went back to drawing in his sketchbook. so she cleared her throat and just went right into it. I'm sorry for being a jerk and hurting you when you were only trying to help me. I should have listened, she said earnestly. I could give you excuses and justifications for my actions, but the simple truth is that I was wrong, and I apologize. Please forgive me. He quickly glanced over at her scars and missing leg before looking back down at his sketchbook. You don't have to apologize for that. I understand. I was a stranger, telling you strange things. And why have you been avoiding me? Am I really that horrible to look at? She asked self-consciously. His head snapped up and he looked over at her in distress. No, that's not it at all. Please don't think that I'm that shallow. You cutesy things. You silly boys. We're playing in the water. You cutesy boys. You silly butts. No, that's not it at all. Please don't think I'm that shallow, he said, turning his chair towards her. It's just, like I said back at the store, you intimidate the hell out of me. I've been having visions about you for years, and then to finally meet you in person, only to fail you. What happened to you was... He shook his head, trying to find the right words to describe it, but then gave up. It was my fault. I should have tried harder. Alvaro, it wasn't your fault at all, she assured him, scooting closer to the desk and looking him in his hazel eyes, willing him to believe her. It was the suit's fault this happened. And my fault. I was the one who chose to stop that drone from blowing up the SUV, and I don't regret that for a minute, but I do have to live with the consequences. He nodded, but she could tell that he still felt guilty. I talked to Enzo this morning. You talked with old Enzo? He asked, cutting her off in disbelief. He doesn't talk... He doesn't talk to anyone besides me and my dad. Ari shrugged. He sent Nero to fetch me because he wanted to see me with his own eyes. Oh, and I had a jam session with your dad up there in the greenhouse as well. It's been a very eventful day, she said with a smirk. Sounds like it, he said, shaking his head with a bemused smile. Anyway, Enzo said that what happened to me was unavoidable. He said that you'd seen that vision too many times for it to turn out any other way. Yeah, he said with a nod and a shrug. The more times I see something, the more important it seems to be. But when I saw a flash of the read and feed sign that day, I just thought... He gave her a remorseful look and then dejectedly stared back down at the sketchbook. I just wanted to try. And you did. But I was just too stupid and stubborn to listen, she insisted, trying to make him feel better. But because this happened to me, Joshua and Miles have come up with a fully functional prosthesis that will help amputees and people born without limbs all over the world. Cam's been reunited with his dad, and we ended up here with all of you, where the suits can't get us, she said, telling this all to herself as much as to Alvaro. And I'm good with that, she said honestly. He nodded again, some of his guilt melting away with her acceptance. So, are we cool now? She asked with a tentative smile. He half smiled back. Yeah, we're cool. Then he went back to his sketching. Ari sat back and looked around his room, noticing the bookcases full of books on symbology, alchemy, religious texts from ancient to modern ideologies, books on how to decipher the meaning of dreams, and tons of reference and history books. Not the typical reading material of your average teenage boy. But then she remembered what Ruby had told her about visions, that they weren't clear, cut and dry glimpses into the future, Sometimes they had to be interpreted. She figured Alvaro must have gotten most of the books from Hugo to help him figure out what he was seeing. "What are you sketching?" she asked, standing up and looking over his shoulder. She saw him making a hatch mark by a depiction of a Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland, with his tongue out in swirls in place of his eyes. There was also a Segno symbol next to a coda symbol underneath the Hatter. The hatch mark he just made upped the tally to 5. There's a picture of the drawing, so if you're not watching and you're only listening, be prepared. I'm about to show the picture that's drawn of the Mad Hatter and the 2 symbols. Taking the picture away and focus. Why is it not focusing? Well, I think you got it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I know you're just playing, but try and do it quietly, buddies. Thank you. Are you handsome? Oh, you're so cute. Oh, you're so cute, you silly little monkey butts. He immediately closed the book and looked up at her like she had just seen something she wasn't supposed to. "I'm sorry, I was just curious," she said, backing away. He looked at her for a second and then sighed. "I guess it's all right if you see it," he said as he opened the sketchbook back to the page he had just seen. "It's about you and Val." "Me and Val?" she asked. "How do you know?" He shrugged. "I just do. It's a feeling I get sometimes with the vision. The tally marks help me keep track of how many times I've seen it. Once the tallies hit 5 or more, I move it over to the binders." He looked down and contemplated the cartoonish depiction of the Mad Hatter. "This last time was pretty clear. It looked like a logo for something, but I can't get more than that, and it's bugging the hell out of me." "But what would a logo of the Mad Hatter have anything to do with Val and me? We don't even hang out. Especially now, after her meltdown." He gave her a wry smirk. "Welcome to my life." He quickly flipped through the pages of his sketchbook, and she saw that it was almost full of sketches and tallies before he went back to the Hatter again. "It must have something to do with music," she said, pointing to the symbols. "Maybe," he said, not sounding convinced. "They could also be symbolic of something else. The coda signals the end of a song or a movement, which could mean that something is coming to an end. And the Dao Segno Al Fine could mean going back to something of significance before being able to move on to the end." He threw his hands up in exasperation. "There are just too many ways to interpret some things. Hugo tries to help, but sometimes we can't figure it out until after it happens, and sometimes not ever. The visions about you are particularly frustrating, since some of the stuff about you doesn't even come from Earth, so we can't reference it." Ari tensed. Cam said only Joshua and the adults knew she wasn't human. Now Alvaro knows too. "You know?" She breathed out anxiously, checking to see if she sensed any fear or revulsion, but all she felt from him was amusement. "I knew before anyone else even had a clue. I told you, I've been having visions of you for years, practically my whole life," he said with his eyes full of acceptance. "There was always a fundamental feeling of foreignness or otherworldliness about you," he tried to explain. "There was all this potential all bound up inside you. I couldn't see it or explain it in a way that made sense. I just felt it. I knew from the beginning, but I didn't say anything about it because it felt secret, if that makes sense. Besides, the things you're capable of, there's no way a human or even a progeny could pull that off." It was strange to think of Alvaro having visions about her for years, knowing she wasn't human even before she did. At least he was cool about not blabbing to everybody, and she was incredibly thankful for that. Then it occurred to her that Alvaro probably knows more about her than she does. Maybe he could help her figure out how she got here. "What other visions have you had about me?" He waited a beat before getting up, and then walked over to the bookcase full of binders that were organized alphabetically. I guess it wouldn't hurt to show you. It's hard to know what to tell people I have visions of, because it might change what actually happens. But I think most of the stuff I've seen about you has already happened, so," he said with a shrug. "And maybe you can help me figure out what some of it means." He picked out a thick binder with an A written on the spine and brought it back over to the desk and opened it up. As he flipped through the contents of the binder, she saw that it was divided up by people in categories. It was stuffed with folders full of sketches and tallies and dates scribbled on them, printouts and notes from different sources, and scrapbook-like pages of collages pieced together from different sketches he had made. The thing was jam-packed, and that was just A. She looked back over at the bookcase and saw that the binders were full all the way to Z, and one that said defies category. Holy cow. So many visions. How does this kid have time to even think, let alone function? Alvaro turned it to a divider that had Ari written on it, beside a crossed-out Kira. He must have had to change her stuff over to the A binder from the K binder when she changed her name. He turned it to the collage page he made for her, and it took her a second to take it all in. She recognized some things right away, and other things not so much. It was pieced together with no rhyme or reason that she could discern. "Wow, Alvaro, you're a really good artist." Alvaro shook his head and grimaced. "I'm adequate at best. You don't even know how frustrating it is to not be able to draw something the way I see it in my head. People are the worst. I suck at faces. I can never get the nose or the lips right, and it throws the whole thing off. Don't get me started on hair," he said, rolling his eyes dramatically. But this was about as comprehensive as I could make it all. The center of the page was taken up by the Scion's Keep symbol of the tree, with its roots and branches intertwined together in a Celtic knot. Only instead of it being gold like it was on Gordon's office door, Alvaro had colored it to look like a living tree. In the center space between the branches, she recognized the pictograph of an eye like the one on Cass's shop window. To the right of that was the healing rune Cale had put on her back. And to the left of the eye was a symbol she didn't recognize. But it felt really familiar, like she should know it. To the right of the healing rune was the outline of a bear head. And to the left of the mystery symbol was the silhouette of a bird, moving down the tree to the spaces on either side of the trunk. She saw that they were filled with scenes. The space on the right of the trunk had a crouching figure wearing jeans, a gray backpack, and a hoodie with the hood covering and hiding most of the face. Behind the... Ahem! Leave your sisters alone. Hercules! Behind the figure, who she guessed was supposed to be her, was the Chicago skyline and a really large moon behind her head. "Is that me?" she asked, pointing to the figure. "Yeah, I told you I suck at faces," he said self-consciously. "No, it's really good," she assured him. "And to be honest, I could never get a clear picture." Excuse me? Cut it out. "And to be honest, I could never get a clear picture of what you look like anyway. It's like you're always shrouded in a fuzzy obscurity." She said offhandedly. But before we continue any further, there's another picture to show of the drawings and the sketches. So here it is for those who are just listening. The picture is coming onto the screen now. Oh, I can't see if it's showing. Oh, it's kind of dark. Hopefully when I turn the brightness up, it'll look normal. Okie dokie, I'm gonna take the picture away in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She said offhandedly, figuring that it probably had something to do with the protection rune on her head that hid her radiant energy and energy signature. Why is the moon so big? It's not the moon, he sighed dejectedly. Remember that hidden potential thing I was talking about? Well, that was the only way I could think of to represent that. You know, like in the old Renaissance paintings of Jesus and the Virgin Mary, with the nimbus of light around their heads to symbolize their celestial divinity. She arched a skeptical eyebrow at him. Me? Divinity? He just shrugged. I can't explain it. It's just a symbolic representation. I don't know. She checked his intentions and saw that he was being honest. It was something he genuinely didn't know how to explain. So she just figured that he must have somehow picked up on the fact that she was a Fluxi and had no idea what that was. Ooh, my throat is getting dry. To keep the flies away. On the left side of the tree's trunk seemed to be a picture of her silhouette taking a running leap, with what looked like an explosion behind her. Is that what you saw about what would happen to me in New York? She asked, pointing at it. He nodded. Yeah, that was it. Just you leaping in an explosion. Not how or why, just that. He pointed to the bottom left corner of the page where there was a bubble with the New York Times header, with a line pointing to the date underneath it, and a circle with a close-up of the date, which read Friday, May 29th. That was the date of Royce's party. Next to that was another circle with a picture of a wristwatch, the hour hand pointing to 10, and the minute hand pointing just between the 9 and the 10-minute marks. Next to that was another circle with a corner store awning with the name First Avenue Grocery Deli on it. This is how we knew where to be when the incident happened, Alvaro continued. I knew that it was going to be in New York on the 29th because of the newspaper, and I knew the time because of the watch. We didn't know if it was going to be AM or PM, so we staked the place out both times just to cover our bases. I knew that you'd be hurt because that's Oz's watch, and that meant he had to be there. And if he came, it must mean that you would need to be healed. And the store was where it was going to happen. I didn't see the read and feed sign until about 20 minutes before we found you in there. How did you know it was me if my face was always obscured in your visions? He gave her a timid half smile. I just knew. You have a strong presence. I told Randall and Ozza that one of them should have approached you, but they thought I'd be less intimidating. He let out a huff of mirthless laughter. You know how well that turned out. Ari felt a stab of guilt. She understood now why Alvaro had tried to start off the conversation with his interpretations of the themes of the books she had been holding. Interpreting and finding the meaning of things was his life. It's what he knows. And with all the things he sees and has to sort through, trying to figure out what they mean and deciding if he can do anything about them, she could understand if he had a cynical view of things. How did you know my name? Most of the time the visions are just flashes of images, but sometimes it's like vignettes with sounds, and sometimes it's just sounds. My parents were afraid that I might be schizophrenic before my dad and I came here to live with old Enzo. Enzo told me what I was, and that I'd inherited the gift of sight from his grandmother, and that I shouldn't be afraid of the visions, but try to understand them. Ari noticed the omission of his mom's death, and could tell he didn't want to get into it, so she just nodded and moved on. Above the New York stuff on the left side of the collage was a picture of the necklace made from the ancient coin she'd found at Artemir, and had given Cam as a birthday present. Above that was a picture of her blue stone pendant before it was broken. You saw the necklace I gave to Cam? I saw the blue pendant first, and it felt like yours, and then I saw a vignette of you giving the necklace to Cam. I knew that you two met up in Chicago, he said, pointing to the figure in front of the Chicago skyline. I put that in the tree because I knew you were going to eventually end up here. And the vignette of the necklace meant you two were still together after Chicago, and you were both connected somehow. I gave him that on his birthday. That's when I told him that he was my family, she said fondly, reminiscing that day. Alvaro nodded as he thought that over. Okay, yeah, that would make sense. Ari pointed to the unfamiliar symbols in the roots of the tree. What do those mean? Don't know. He pointed to the circular symbol in the diamond-shaped space in the middle of the roots, and she remembered having mindlessly doodled that a couple times during her classes back at St. Anthony's. Hugo says this one has basic similarities to many ancient symbols, but he doesn't recognize it, and I can't find it in any of my books, so it must be something from where you came from. But Hugo pointed out that it's in the middle of the roots that look like the Proto-Germanic Odal rune, which stands for heritage and inheritance. So, yeah. Huh. Interesting. We don't know anything about this one either, he said as he pointed to the symbol to the left of the one in the diamond, and she suddenly heard a memory of a male voice. Do you know why we call you Senna, my precious girl? The voice had been deep and soothing, and was so familiar she involuntarily gasped. She knew with every fiber of her being that it was her father's voice. He spoke a different language than her mother had, but she understood it perfectly. My father. Ahem. She still couldn't picture him, but she had the feeling of strong arms lifting and comforting her, almost like the shadow of a forgotten dream. Alvaro looked over at her anxiously. Are you okay? What's wrong? Ari felt like she was on the brink of balling herself into a puddle of emotional goo, but she got herself under control and held it together, promising herself that she'd digest this later when she was alone. Shaking her head, she said, I think that is some kind of glyph representing my old name, Senna, she said, rubbing her finger over the symbol that reminded her of a flower. Alvaro's eyes widened. Really? Okay, cool. He grabbed a pencil, sat down, and wrote in the margin what she had just told him. There's also this one, he said, pointing to the weirdly familiar symbol in the branches of the tree. Again, it has similarities with other ancient symbols, but other than that, we have no clue. No memories came with this one, just the weird feeling of familiarity. So she shook her head and shrugged. He pointed to the healing rune on the other side of Cass's icon. Now that is the Celtic symbol for change and renewal, and the evolutions of the universe. That's the healing rune Kale put on my back after I got shot, she said as her left hand reached back over her right shoulder towards her shoulder blade. What's a healing rune? Hold up! You got shot? Damn, girl, you're indestructible. No matter what happens to you, you just get right back up and dust yourself off. I don't know about that. Ari shrugged off, not knowing how to react to that comment. She had almost died twice. She certainly didn't just stand back up and dust herself off like nothing happened. Everything took its toll. But then the drawings on the bottom right corner caught her eye. That's the teddy bear Jean-Baptiste left for me at the hospital after he found me floating in a canal back in Georgia. And that's the eagle pin I found in a gutter outside my school when I was in 2nd grade. She remembered turning it in to the principal, but no one came to claim it, so he gave it back to her to keep. That's when she got the idea to put it on Lydia's fairy house in the antique terrarium. Do you know why he saw these? He shook his head. No, they only started popping up in the past year, and they always seem to be together, and not just in that form. He pointed to the bear and the bird symbols in the branches of the tree. Hugo and I have tried speculating what they could mean, but there were just too many possibilities, so who knows? I remembered the bear sculpture that had been in the Lennox's barn when she had first arrived at Paradise Glades, and then Cam's eagle mask that he had worn for the flock. Maybe they are sort of a running theme. She pointed to the circles in the top right corner. What do these mean? Alvaro pointed to the bottom circle. Well, that's the Lesser Seal of Solomon. There's a medieval legend that it had been engraved on a signet ring made of iron and brass. The legend goes that it was given to King Solomon directly from heaven to give him power over demons and evil spirits. At the mention of demons and evil spirits, I immediately thought of the shades. Well, that's a bit disturbing. Then Alvaro pointed to the circle at the top. Hugo and I identified that as the symbol for Inanna, the Mesopotamian goddess of love, fertility, and warfare. What does that have to do with me? Alvaro shrugged. Ahem. Stop it. Alvaro shrugged. Beats me. Like I said, some things we never figure out. Maybe one of my ancestors was one of the Anu colonists. Alvaro pointed to the circle in the middle, which was divided in half, with a white withered tree on a black background on the bottom, and a black flourishing tree on a white background on the top. It made Ari think about Ruby's vision of the two saplings, one growing strong in the light, and the other one twisted and withered from growing in darkness. This is the first vision I ever had about you. The first time I saw it was when we first came to Scion's Keep, he said, glancing over at her. Hugo says that it probably has something to do with man's duality and reaching a balance between oppositions or something like that. I know other oracles that have seen that too. They said that the trees represent me, and it has to do with how I grew up. They said that I needed a firm moral foundation. Oh, I didn't realize that went up so high. So much for emotional reacting when you can't even see my face. One moment. Okay. They said that I needed a firm moral foundation, so I'd grow up strong and true to enlighten the souls of man. And if I didn't, then I'd poison the world with my evil fruit, Ari said with a bleak detachment. Alvaro looked over at her incredulously. Seriously? No pressure or anything, right? Damn, I thought I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. He went to put a comforting hand on her back, but quickly realized that in his sitting position, it would be her lower back, and changed his mind. If it makes you feel any better, I don't think you're evil at all, so there's that. Ari smiled with a quiet, amused chuckle. Thanks, it does help a bit. I had another vision about you yesterday evening, but it was of 3 people, so I didn't even try sketching it. What were they doing? Do you know who they were? She asked. There was a pretty black woman, a tall, attractive white woman with long blonde hair, and a big, muscly guy with short black hair and a darker complexion. They were all sitting around a living room talking to each other. It could be Ruby or Cass, possibly Jamie, but who's the guy? And why would Cass or Ruby be talking with Jamie, though? They don't even know each other. Can you show me? I told you I suck at drawing people, he objected. No, not that, she dismissed. If you picture it in your mind, I can see it, if you'll let me. Oh, he said, taken aback with a hint of excitement. Yeah, okay, we can try that. But it's been a little while, and some of it might not be as detailed as when I first saw it. That's okay, she assured him. All right, picture the vision as clearly as you can in your mind. Tell me when you got it. She sat back down on the couch so they could be eye to eye. After a second, he nodded. Got it. Ari connected to his energy while looking into his eyes, and suddenly she flashed into the Lennox's living room in the old farmhouse at Paradise Glades. Cass was sitting in the wingback chair by the couch, wearing a conservative outfit. Her hair was hanging down past her shoulders in long braids, instead of wrapped up in a colorful scarf like it had been in New Orleans. Jamie and the mystery man Ari didn't recognize were sitting on the couch listening intently to something Cass was saying. Cass looked deadly serious, and Jamie looked confused and scared, with tear trails running down her face. Alvaro was right. The details were fuzzy, but the intent of the scene was clear. Cass was telling them something important. What in the world was she telling them that has Jamie so upset? Jamie wasn't the type to get weepy, so it had to be something seriously disturbing. Ari looked over at the mystery man again. He was a big, brawny guy with light brown skin and black hair cut real short in a high and tight military style. She remembered Adam saying something in his dream that she had walked into about one of his army buddies watching over Jamie while he was gone. The guy had one arm around Jamie's shoulders and was holding one of her hands in his, as if he was comforting her. Ari detected an underlying intimacy between them. Are they dating? After getting all the information she could from the vision, Ari reluctantly broke the connection between her and Alvaro. Even though the situation was distressing, it was good to see Jamie and Cass again. "Did you get it already?" he asked. The whole thing had only taken a couple seconds real time. She nodded. "The woman with the long braids is one of the oracles I was telling you about, and the blonde woman is Jamie Lennox. She's like an aunt to me. I don't recognize the man. I wonder what they were talking about," she mused aloud. "It seemed intense, whatever it was," Alvaro shrugged. "Man, this is so cool. With your Vulcan mind meld thing, I could just show you the stuff I can't draw, and you can show Hugo and Gordon." "Yeah, sure," she said distractedly, as she kept thinking over the vision. Where the heck is Adam? Has he gone off to look for me again? She couldn't help feeling an anxious concern start to simmer in the pit of her stomach. Please be okay, Adam. Her skin cuff pinged, and she saw it was a text from Cam. "Hugo really wants to talk with you about your memory. He's practically chomping at the bit." Ari tapped back that she was on her way, and then looked back up at Alvaro. "I've got to get back to Hugo's office. I'll see you later, yeah?" she asked hopefully, barely acknowledging the fact that the last bit of what she said sounded a lot like something Cale would say. He had left more of a mark on her than she was willing to admit. Alvaro smiled and nodded. "Yeah, I'll see you at dinner." "Awesome." She quickly grabbed her crutches and made her way out of the room. Just before she closed the door, she noticed a single bee with an incredibly thin Gossamer energy tether attached to it fly out of the room. "I see you, Enzo." And that was the end of chapter 7. Long chapter. Woo! And what a long day in the story. Quite a day. But I am sore throat and need to rest up before getting ready for work, so I think I'm probably done for tonight. And I'm probably running out of space again. And my phone won't charge properly, so we'll just add it to the list of things going awry. Thank you for joining us for Chapter 7 of Catalyst by Lisa Beeson. Peace.